Hey everyone, so today on this video I'm going to be talking about New South Wales abolishing its stamp duty and what that means, the four impacts that will have on the real estate market. So if you're interested in that, which you should be, stick around. So my name's PK and I help people achieve passive income through property investing using a unique formula to buy the combination of positive cash flow property and capital growth property together. And I do this without having people fork out tens of thousands of dollars on buyer's agents, without having to spend weekends at inspections, and also without spending weeks or months doing research on realestate.com.au and websites like that. So let's get into the video. So a couple of days ago, New South Wales announced, it's not legislation, so it's actually not approved technically yet, but they announced that they'll be abolishing stamp duty. Now, if you have bought real estate or if you have been interested in buying real estate, you will know how annoying stamp duty is. Not everywhere in the world has stamp duty, and it's a lump sum tax that buyers of real estate need to pay. It's very unique to Australia. Like in New Zealand, you don't have this. So it's just another transaction cost, which makes it quite inconvenient and very expensive to buy real estate. And especially in New South Wales, where they are proposing, it's basically finalized. It's not technically legislation, but it's basically finalized that they're going to abolish it. Now, this is massive, massive, massive news, okay? As if the property market didn't have enough things behind it to boost up prices. Now, whether you think that's good or bad, the reality is that there's plenty of momentum behind national property prices, and every single capital city and more regions than not are actually now experiencing an increase in property prices, with big banks now saying that actually we're reversing our previous predictions of 30% price falls to now price increases, 5% increase, 10% increase, etc. But let's get back to the point. Taking away stamp duty, it's not a free lunch. So some people think it's a free lunch. Sorry about my voice, by the way, I've got a bit of a cold going on. It's not a free lunch. So what they will do is they'll take away the $20, $30, $40, $50,000 you have to pay on initial stamp duty, and instead replace it with an ongoing yearly property tax, or a bit like a land tax, like you have to pay in Tasmania or you have to pay in ACT right from the get-go. If you hold an investment property, you need to pay a couple of $100 or up to $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, depending on what the value of the property is, every single year. So that's what they're proposing in New South Wales. So instead of paying $30,000, $40,000 initially, you get that property without having to pay stamp duty, and instead every year you pay like an ongoing tax to the state government. This is actually, stamp duty is a huge way in which state governments make money, so it's important for New South Wales to replace it with this ongoing, you can say, property tax. But here's the thing. The first thing you need to know about the impact of taking away stamp duty is that it will certainly push up house prices in New South Wales. Now, of course, I've just said that it's no free lunch, that it's not just a taking away of one tax and it's actually increasing another tax. But here's the thing. Most people, I'm not going to say that word most, a lot of people don't buy property because they simply can't afford to get in. They can actually afford to hold property, but they can't afford the initial deposit plus stamp duty to get in. Now, with taking away this stamp duty, they will be able to afford to get in. And then whether they can afford to keep it or not is a separate story, but they will kind of put that on the back burner and say, look, let's just get in, let's just ride that wave, and then we'll deal with the property tax later, okay? And of course, in New South Wales, especially Sydney, Wollongong, Newcastle, the majority of properties are negatively geared. So having a property tax will just make these properties even more negatively geared. But investors and owner-occupiers, first home buyers, they don't really do the math of the annual cost to hold the property, most of them are more fixated with, can I afford to get in? And now this will mean that all these people, literally hundreds, literally thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of investors or first home buyers that couldn't afford to get in now can get in. Now, what that will mean is that aggregate house prices increase. Now, the second thing you need to know about the impact of stamp duty is that, and this is a question I've got a lot recently in the last couple of days, will that mean that some suburbs grow more than others? Will the abolishment of stamp duty mean that some suburbs will now boom? The answer to that is, if you knew how to read the data, if you knew the 35 factors, the quantitative and qualitative factors that dictate price growth, you would have already known that in Sydney, for example, there are about a dozen suburbs between $800 and $1.2 million that were growing anyway very quickly. What the stamp duty abolishment will mean is that these suburbs now just go faster. They were growing anyway, they will now grow faster. Same with Newcastle. There's a bunch of suburbs that are very close to neutral, if not slightly positive, that were growing anyway. South Newcastle was, suburbs have gone 50,000 up right through coronavirus. These suburbs will just get a new sort of momentum and grow even faster because more people can afford to buy there. So does stamp duty abolishment mean that some suburbs will grow faster? Yes, but it's the same ones that were showing strength anyway. If a suburb was going backwards or it was very flat, it's very unlikely that all of a sudden will now boom. It's not a case of every single suburb will now boom, only the good ones. So be very, very selective. Now, the third thing you want to know about the abolishment of stamp duty and its impact is that other states will be forced to think about what they're doing. So like, let's say in Brisbane, in South Australia, in Western Australia, where they haven't thought really at all of making this change, there's still stamp duty and there is no annual property tax, because national investors will now, for better or worse, lean towards New South Wales. These other states and territories will be forced to think about their stance and their position on stamp duty. Naturally, if you're an investor, and not all investors are like this, but let's say you're an investor and you have $1 million to spend and you were going to put it in an inner city suburb in Brisbane like Hendra, and now you can put that $1 million into a suburb in Sydney and not have to pay stamp duty, you're really, really, really tempted to put it in Sydney, right? Because you're getting more for your buck. You're not paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in stamp duty. In fact, you're buying the land, you're buying the house for that. It's more effective use of your money. So this will really mean that over the long term, it's not going to be a short-term phenomenon. Over the long term, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, etc., will really need to think hard, do the financial modeling, and see whether they need to also follow suit. And my personal thinking, without anything to back up, is that in 5 years from now, you will see a consistent tax policy across Australia, because otherwise this fantastic move that New South Wales is making is going to give it a competitive edge when it comes to drawing investors and drawing population to buy property there. So that's the third thing you need to know about the abolishment of stamp duty. And the fourth thing you want to know is that this is absolutely fantastic news for developers, for renovators. If you've done my course, you know how to renovate. This is a fantastic way for people to make way more money than they were able to even yesterday. So as soon as this gets passed into legislation in March, now all of a sudden those renovation deals, those flips, those developments that were kind of on the fence, they were going to make money, but not quite enough to warrant the risk. Maybe the margin on development cost was, 10%, maybe it was 15%. This abolishment will mean that all of a sudden you're not having to pay stamp duty. The person who's going to buy the end product from you, the renovated house or the townhouse or the spec home, is not going to pay stamp duty. So it's cheaper for you to do the deal, and it's more likely that you'll get a better price when you sell it. So all of a sudden, the hundreds, if not thousands, if not literally tens of thousands of reno deals and quick, development deals that weren't making sense just yesterday are gonna make sense. The feasibility is gonna stack up. So this is absolutely fantastic news for developers and renovators. So if you're on the fence about renovating, I'd really consider doing it, really, really soon, as soon as it's passed into legislation. So it's a bit of a catch-22. If you're thinking about buying a property, your natural question is going to be, PK, should I wait or should I buy now? If you are wanting to develop, if you are wanting to renovate, wait for the legislation to pass, okay? Because then you're going to reap the benefit and your deal is going to make that much more money. However, if you are just buying and holding, that's a tough question. Should you buy now or should you buy later? My inkling is that if you buy now, yes, you have to pay the stamp duty, but you'll be the beneficiary of that entire additional capital growth that the good suburbs will experience because of less transaction costs. On the flip side, if you wait till March, if you wait till July, if you wait till end of next year to buy, you won't have to pay stamp duty, but much of the gains will already be experienced. Much of the capital growth may have already been experienced. I don't know which way it's going to go. It might be like a tidal wave where right now everyone waits and the water goes out from the beach, and then as soon as it gets passed into legislation, there's this big tidal wave that comes and everyone buys because it's way cheaper. Now, if everyone's going to buy then, is it a good idea to do that or buy now so you can get the effect of capital growth, the growth of that huge demand coming in? I don't know. What do you think? Tell me. Because these things, abolishment of stamp duty is going to increase prices, let me know in the comments, do you think it's a good time to buy now and reap the full benefits of that growth story? Or do you think that it's a better idea to wait till March, till April, once it's legislated, and then buy and not have to pay stamp duty, even though much of the growth or some of the growth may have already been experienced in the good suburbs? It's always about the good suburbs, right? You never have to never sacrifice the good suburbs. So what do you think? Let me know. Should you buy now because of this, or should you wait till March or April? Let me know in the comments. So hopefully that was super useful, guys. And one last thing as well. Some states like ACT and Tassie, they right now already have huge land tax rates. So I think what's going to happen, not in a year, maybe not in 2 years, but in 3, 4, 5 years, is equilibrium will need to be sought, right? So what will need to happen is if land tax is going to be increased in New South Wales, or property tax in lieu of that stamp duty, then places like ACT, where the land tax is already huge and you have to pay those transaction costs, they will need to normalize to make sure they aren't disadvantaging investors and owner occupiers and house buyers versus New South Wales. So I think in the long term, the tax policy will be sort of normalized and very consistent, very similar across Australia. I think the long term, 5 years, it will need to happen. Otherwise one state, one territory has an advantage, or unfair advantage, or unfair disadvantage versus another. These things take time, but I think we've all been waiting for it a long time. So once again, let me know if this is a good time to buy, or you reckon it's best to wait till March once the legislation passes and then buy, to not have to pay stamp duty. Once again, my name is PK, and I will also leave a link below, and you can find out exactly how you can take advantage of data to find capital growth suburbs that also are positive cash flow in New South Wales, all right? So that will be super useful for you. And leave a comment, leave a like or a love below so that more people can reach it. The algorithm spreads this video and people can be well informed. Okay, guys, well, hopefully that was super useful. Take care. Bye.